Kerala, known for its natural beauty, its vibrant culture, and its peaceful way of life. But in the midst of this idyllic backdrop, a tragedy unfolded that no one could have ever anticipated. A 23-year-old man, a son, a brother, and a friend became the center of a shocking act of violence that left a community in disbelief. This is the tragic story of Affan, a young man whose journey took an irreversible turn into darkness. The shocking tragedy of Kerala's 23-year-old, a story of despair, violence, and a community in mourning. Affan was a typical 23-year-old in many ways. He had dreams, a family, friends, and the world ahead of him. He lived in Venjaramudu, a quiet suburb near Thiruvananthapuram. To those who knew him, Affan seemed like just another young man navigating the ups and downs of life. But underneath the surface, things were much different. Affan had always been close to his family, especially his mother, who was the center of his world. But life wasn't always easy for him. He had begun to fall into a deep financial hole. A staggering 75 lakh rupees in debt, borrowed from various sources, weighed heavily on his shoulders. Each day, he struggled to make ends meet, but the mounting pressure became unbearable. He had to pay 10,000 rupees every single day to cover his debts, a burden that seemed endless. The dream of getting back on his feet slowly faded, and instead a sense of despair began to take over his thoughts. On the evening of February 24th, 2025, something inside Affan snapped. The pressure, the debt, the feeling of being trapped, it was all too much. In an unimaginable turn of events, Affan took matters into his own hands. The family, his mother, his younger brother, his girlfriend, and even close relatives would become the victims of his rage. Affan's actions were calculated. One by one, he used a hammer to brutally attack each of his victims. His mother, his 13-year-old brother, his girlfriend, and even his aunt and uncle. 5 lives lost in the blink of an eye. The violence was savage. The impact of his actions left a mark not just on his family, but on a community that would never be the same again. How could someone who had once been so close, so familiar, turn to such unthinkable violence? The answer isn't simple, but it lies in the deep strain that Affan had been under. When the police arrived, it was already too late. Affan had fled, but not far. His mind was clouded, and his desperation had driven him to surrender, to confess. He couldn't escape the reality of his actions. Affan was arrested, and soon after, details began to emerge about his debts and the overwhelming pressure he had been under. His mother, who was the only survivor, was critically injured and is now recovering in the hospital. Affan's story is tragic, not just because of the lives lost, but because of the pressures that pushed him to the edge. We cannot ignore the mental and emotional toll that financial struggles can have on a person. This is not an excuse for his actions, but a call for understanding. This young man wasn't a killer at heart. He was someone who lost hope, who felt like there was no way out.
Breaking news.
It's easy to demonize someone for what they've done, but when we look closer, we see the signs of someone crying out for help, someone who never got the support they needed. The people in the community are in shock. They knew Affan as a quiet, perhaps troubled young man, but they never imagined he was capable of such violence. The question many are asking is, how could we have seen this coming? This tragedy isn't just about the horror of a young man committing a brutal act. It's about the larger issue of mental health, financial distress, and the need for community support. Too many young people are silently struggling with their mental health and financial troubles, and we, as a society, need to do more to help them. We need better systems in place to identify and support those who are falling through the cracks. Mental health counseling, financial education, and more importantly, compassionate communities could have made a difference in Affan's life. Affan's actions will never be excusable. 5 lives were lost, and the scars of that night will never fade. But let us remember the humanity of the story, the humanity of a young man who, despite his flaws, was once full of potential. This is a reminder to all of us that life can change in an instant, and it's up to us to ensure that no one has to face their darkest moments alone. May we learn from this tragedy, and work together to build a society where no one is left to suffer in silence. This video was created to shed light on the tragic events and the importance of mental health support in our communities.